Call to order the meeting at 6. Transportation Advisory Board, City of Longmont, January 13th. Let's do roll call, please.
Chair Lehner.
Here.
Board Member Bennett.
Present.
Board Member Wickland.
Here.
Vice Chair McKee-Burrows.
Here.
Board Member McInerney.
Here.
Board Member Kalkofer.
Here.
Phil, should I mention Board Member Kim's absence?
That sounds great. I was going to do it too, or it would be better coming from you, I think.
Okay. So for everybody, Nicholas Kim has resigned his position on the board. So he let us know today. That's why he's not here. And we will continue on as a board without replacing that seat, I guess we'll say, until the elections in June, or the new board assignments. Okay, we can move to the minutes from the December 2024 meeting. Any comments or any corrections needed on the minutes of the December meeting? If there isn't, we can go ahead and get an approval on that. I need a motion and then a second.
I motion that we approve the minutes from December 2024 meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board.
Second.
Great. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Let's move on to communications from staff. Phil?
Great. Thank you very much. We have a few items for you tonight. We're going to change up the order a little bit and start with the Vision Zero updates with the US 287 safety study funding issue from Cammie Edson.
There we go. Hello, board. Nice to see you tonight. Thank you for letting me go first so we can get off to volleyball practice. So thank you. 3 minutes. I know. Start. Yeah. First update, yes, as Phil mentioned, the 287 Vision Zero safety study, which Boulder County came and I think spoke with you all last March, I believe it was. And then they presented to City Council the same presentation, I think last April, where you all recommended approval of that. They went to the Board of County Commissioners last Tuesday and officially had that approved, which means now all the partners involved in that, which includes us, all of the municipalities along 287, will kind of move into the next phase of looking for funding to implement some of the recommendations that came out of that study, which at a really high level included the median barriers, kind of on the north and south side of Longmont was a key one, rumble strips in the spots where there aren't already rumble strips, so that work is already in progress. And then linking up intersection improvements as well as just other multimodal improvements. It will be linked to the BRT, but the bus rapid transit study that was also done along the corridor. So lots of good work and recommendations in that plan. So just wanted to let you know that the county has officially adopted it as well, and we'll be moving forward with that. And then related to Vision Zero, more kind of internal to Longmont, the task force, we had our first 3 meetings, as some of you know. In 2024, we've had an average about 22 attendees since the beginning, which is nice. We are looking to have a new location and a new time in 2025 to make it work better for the majority of members. So we're looking at having our first meeting in early February, either on a Wednesday or Thursday night instead of Mondays, because there's a lot of conflicts for not only staff, but community members on Monday nights, including you all. So we're thinking it's going to be at the senior center or the library. We're just trying to confirm the location, but I can send out, if you want to sort of save the date for now, the 5th or 6th. And the idea is we might go to an every other month cycle. So we can have a large group meeting every other month, and then looking at possibly having subcommittees or kind of work group time on those opposite months. So more's coming soon. We have a nice new newsletter coming out for Vision Zero. It should go out at the end of this week or early next week. All nice looking stuff. So it'll be nice and contained, much better than the emails we've been sending out. So, And then related to that, just internally, we are very close to submitting our first contract for the SS4A grant, which you've heard about, the 1.2 million. We got the paperwork from the Federal Highway Administration. We are going to be submitting that hopefully by Friday, if not Monday, so they can do their formal review of it, and then they'll send it back to the city for formal review by legal, and then we'll take it to City Council for adoption. And at that point, we'll be able to start working with consultants to bring the action plan to life. And in the meantime, we're going to be working on the RFP for consultants, so we can sort of be rocking and rolling on getting the action plan officially started as soon as possible. They're expecting the timeline they've given us as April would be the earliest we can expect to start, so we're hoping to start this spring on implementing and using those funds. So those are sort of the quick high-level updates for right now, unless you have any questions about Vision Zero pieces. And I think Phil was mentioning maybe we'll do a more formal presentation on the other projects that Vision Zero is working on this year a little bit later.
Yeah, I just have a quick question on the, excuse me, on the Safe Streets for All. Is that money, have we gotten the money, or is that encumbered? Because I know that was kind of a question mark
So
at this point.
This is what the contract will do. That won't encumber. So it's been awarded. Once we sign the contract, then they'll be able to release the money to us. Yep. So that's when we think we'll be able to get that money this spring, we hope. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and the reimbursable items for those who are. Right. And then submit for reimbursement. Yeah. We will have one allocation for the money, right? And so they will disperse it in one phase. That's how we're putting it out, but it is a reimbursable grant.
So to be clear, we will do the work, pay for it out of city funds, and then seek reimbursement for it. That's how most grants from the state and the federal government work. So we've already budgeted for it, so we're ready to go.
But in their mind, it'll be allocated when they give us that letter to proceed, hopefully this spring. So it'll be accounted for. Yep. So thank you. Oh, sure.
I think there might be a question.
Yes, Cammie, regarding 287, when we first heard about that, it sounded like nothing could be done until there was funding secured for doing everything. Is that still the case? Because I know those median barriers were identified as being very high priority items.
Yeah, there's a number of project areas, medians being one of them. And then there's intersection studies, there's, multimodal bike paths or BRT projects. They're going to all probably have different funding streams come in. So the median barriers are the ones that they were talking about wanting to find all the money for together, is what I believe. You can chime in too if you think it's different. But I know when they were talking about that, it was to get the median barriers that are north and south of Longmont covered. That was the money I believe they were talking about, trying to get all together before starting that project. Doesn't mean work on the intersection, like the rumble strips are already, CDOT's already working on putting them in place. So some of the other recommendations are already in progress and there's funding for.
Yeah, they did secure grant funding for those projects as well, north and south of Longmont, for the medians and the rumble strips. So those are being looked at right now. They're getting into the first phase of design.
Thank you. Yeah.
So if there are no more questions, we'll move to the Camp e-bike share grant update from Kaylee Fallon. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kaylee Fallon. I believe I presented to you all before, but just wanted to reintroduce myself in case we haven't met. But so just a quick update on the Community Accelerated Mobility Project grant that we received. And I'll give a little bit of background context too, just so we can level set. But so for the past about 2 years, since 2022, Commuting Solutions TMO had worked on a Northwest Regional bike share expansion feasibility study. And they worked on that in partnership with B-Cycle and then the surrounding communities of the Longmont area. So including the city of Longmont, but also including city and county of Boulder, city and county of Broomfield, Superior, Lafayette, Louisville, all those local municipalities that are in the Commuting Solutions TMO service area. And so kind of off the heels of that feasibility study that was finalized and published at the end of 2024, the partners all decided to pursue the CAMP grant from the state, the Colorado Energy Office, and Longmont acted or served as the lead applicant for that application. So we were awarded $1.5 million from the state through that grant funding. And so that is over a 3-year period, I believe, for that grant. And so the next steps for that, we are currently finalizing the contract with CEO, the IGA with them. And then we are also looking into finalizing an MOU and IGA with all the other local agency partners that will be pursuing implementation of this bike share program. So once we have all those contracts in place, we will be going out to RFP to select an operator that will be selected by a group of staff from all the partner agencies involved in the expansion process. And then once we have the RFP out and vendor selected, then we will go to implementation. So we are very excited about this project. We are looking forward to the implementation phase and just working through contracts right now. And one thing I did want to highlight about both the IGA and the RFP process is that we're really doing our due diligence to make sure that we have the correct language in those documents, specifically around data sharing. So we have worked with Denver Regional Council of Governments. They have an active and emerging mobility program there, and we've worked with their staff to make sure that we have the correct language to put in that RFP around the specific APIs and MDS feeds, so that we are making sure that we are selecting a vendor that can provide correct and accurate data so that we can make informed decisions about the program when it launches and be able to monitor the program as well. So that is kind of my quick update on the CAMP grant, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks for the information. I don't know how far along we are, but how many stations do we think we're going to have, or is that way too far in the future? And also, is there any requirements for ridership? Like, are helmets going to be required? Hopefully not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a copy of the Northwest Regional Bike Share Feasibility Study if you want to take a look, but it's also available online on Commuting Solutions website. And so this feasibility study did estimate the amount of bikes and docking stations that they thought would be feasible for each of the local agencies. And so for Longmont, they estimated about 110 bikes and 220 docking stations. Again, that's an estimate, but I would encourage you to look at the study and read through it. It has a lot more detail, and of course we will, once we select a vendor, kind of work with them really closely to make sure that we have the accurate amount of bikes and docking stations. And I'm sorry, I should have clarified. So the bike share will be a docked station, so station docked program, and it'll be e-bikes. And then to your question about helmets, I don't think we've gotten to those conversations, but I'll let Phil add on if that.
Yeah, at this time, we're not planning to require helmets necessarily. That's still personal choice and not required by law, but we'll certainly encourage them quite a bit. So we'll encourage folks to use helmets. Also, it should just be noted that so the $1.5 million isn't going to cover all those bikes for all those different communities. So part of our job as staff is to kind of figure out the percentage of how much we can afford with the $1.5 million, breaking that into the percentage for each community that they were going to get as far as number of bikes and docking stations, and building the intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, out of that. So there's going to be a lot of nuance to this where we have to really play with the numbers and make sure everybody's happy before we kind of move forward. As we start to allocate the grant dollars, we're going to have a number of governments, including our own, who's going to say, hey, we can't afford the full slate of these, but how do we start the program and get it moving?
What's the timeline for when you might actually be implementing all these bikes? That's
That is
probably a very difficult question.
Yeah, I'll let Phil answer that.
Well, I think Longmont, we're at the forefront of wanting these stations and restarting the program, because we did have as most people know, we did have a bike share program that did okay until the pandemic, and then obviously it was probably not a very successful work plan that they had, and it wasn't very good with the pandemic starting up. So everything kind of hit at the wrong time there. So our idea is to really get started we're going to do some things, I think, in the next year to really start implementing kind of away from this program, and then use these dollars to supplement. So we are already kind of working with some folks in the background to make sure we can get things moving, but we have to be very careful about our procurement process and how these dollars move forward, because they're federal dollars. So in order to get them, we need to go through the procurement process for federal funding. So we can't really go with a vendor without going through that process first. So it's going to be kind of complicated, but we think we have some ways to kind of work with this and get this going fairly quickly in government terms. So within 2025, we're hoping by the end of the year to see something on the ground.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty fast. I was thinking like, oh, it's another 2 years. It's like-
Great, thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we're going to invite Ben Ortiz up to talk a little bit about Winter Bike to Work Day. So thanks.
Good evening. My name is Ben Ortiz. I'm a transportation planner. And so those of you who are familiar with Bike to Work Day knows that it's a regional event, and that DRCOG, or the Denver Regional Council of Governments, is the organization that organizes that event in the Denver metro region. And so individual businesses, local governments, nonprofits, they're the ones who organize the individual stations. And then so the city of Longmont, we've hosted a station for Winter Bike to Work Day as well as Summer Bike to Work Day for going on several years now. So this year's Winter Bike to Work Day is going to be taking place on Friday, February 14th. So Valentine's Day, because we love bikes. And we are still in negotiation in terms of the location. In years past, we've held it right outside the Development Services Center, or actually inside the lobby, depending upon the weather. Usually when it's been approaching 0 degrees, we move everything inside, but the past several years, the weather has been pretty amenable to having that event outside. And we usually have a pretty good turnout. In years past, we've had up to 40 people attend that station. So again, we will be hosting a station on February 14th. Again, we have a couple of stations that we're looking at, but we haven't buttoned that down yet. And one of the other things I wanted to note is that we're hoping that we could fold in a ride Longmont, the new vans, microtransit, a promotional in with that event. And so we'd like to get a van there that has, bike racks, so the people who ride in, they can give it a try and load a bike up. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Does the city have any other sponsors that businesses can do as well for space stations, or is it just the city of Longmont that has stations?
Well, I'm not sure about the winter event. I'm fairly honestly, I don't know about the winter event. I know that city of Longmont, we've done it consistently for several years. In the summer event, however, we have had several private sponsors of stations throughout the city. And one, for example, is this chiropractic's office. And then, of course, the city, and then some other businesses that have done it. But again, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, they're the ones who put out the map. They generate the map where all of the station locations are at. And anyone can literally reach out to them and say, hey, I want to organize a station, and here's my info. And then they would plot their station on the map. And so it's an event anyone can participate in if they want to. I think even probably an individual household could do it if they wanted to. So I don't know that there are any restrictions necessarily for participation.
I would just say as a city, we encourage other businesses to participate, and that'd be wonderful.
Do you have a question? So because it's through DRCOG, do we through, let's say, the Longmont Downtown Association or anything of that nature, let businesses know that they could sponsor this? Or is this something that we just kind of leave up to them to figure out on their own? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we have reached out to businesses in the past, and it's certainly something we'd like to continue doing in the future. And so we'll make a point of it, and let's see what we get. It does take quite a bit of effort to organize the one station, and so if you're doing it alone, you could have a station, but it's probably a scaled back station. But to do something like we've done here at the Civic Center really does require quite a few people to help out, and so it is a commitment.
I would just also add that we've already reached out to the Downtown Development Authority, and so we're working with them on a location that could be part of the downtown piece of that new venue. So we are looking at that as a possible site for our city event.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any public invited to be heard. Nope, I didn't think so. Okay, we can move on to item 6, information items, the response to the August Transportation Advisory Board motion on new capacity.
Great, I'll take this one. Again, Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city. Just wanted to let you know we did take your comments from our last meeting very seriously, and we wanted to make sure that we addressed it fully and completely and publicly, that there was a motion made in your August meeting at the CIP, during the CIP discussion, the Capital Improvement Program discussion, about, there was a motion made by Chair Lehner that was, Member McInerney also added to the motion, I believe, and it was passed. Regarding a couple different things. So we just wanted to go through that and make sure that we are addressing it the way you see fit. And so the motion was that if there was any kind of capacity improvements, and that's kind of the title of this subject here, is if there are any capacity improvements for the 2025 budget, that there'd be no more widening to increase capacity for cars, but instead to increase capacity for vulnerable road users. 2, more emphasis on looking at intersections and roundabouts and the feasibility of said roundabouts. 3, having separated bicycle facilities when looking at road diets. 4, looking at vulnerable road users first, and then looking at vehicles. And in addition, Board Member McInerney asked that Council confirm that those municipal building renovation projects conform to code restrictions for the use of sales tax funds. So that was added on. And the question was asked at the last meeting, well, how did you address those issues, or that motion? And at the time, we were thinking that we really had taken that motion as more a policy directive and move it into our transportation mobility plan as elements of that. And I think it was even mentioned at the meeting. I don't know if it made the minutes or not, but it was mentioned at the meeting that those are some elements that we're already looking at for the TMP. I think one of the board members might have mentioned that. And so we just want to make sure that you understand that that's where a lot of those pieces are going as far as new policy, and they didn't really address the project specific for a capital project. So there was no comments specifically made about the capital project, so we didn't move those into the budget discussions with council, but we did want to make sure that council is aware of your concerns. So what we have in this communication and what we'd recommend is that, and I know it's not an action item, but we would, just generally like to hear from folks whether it's okay to just leave this as a TMP issue as far as policy, or if you would like, staff can certainly put together an actual formal information item to City Council stating exactly what this communication states, is that this motion went through and passed, and you were making a recommendation to City Council based on a budget. And of course, that budget's already gone through, so we can't really go back, but we want to make sure that it's at least out there for City Council to understand what you did at that meeting. And then also put it in, it's going to go into the Transportation Mobility Plan, and it's already in our draft, so just to let you know that. So with that, I would turn it back to the board, and just what is the desire of the board moving forward?
I guess as it relates to, I understand policy versus and part of the budget. So you could put together an information item that goes to City Council that discusses what we advised, and then I guess something about including it in the TMP, because that's probably, you're right, more appropriate to be in that. There's going to be no, other than that, City Council's, there's going to be no influence with respect to anything that we've put there, right?
Well, we'll also come back to this board in February. At your February meeting, we already have it scheduled that will come before you to recommend to City Council the Transportation Mobility Plan. So you'll need to do that at your February 10th meeting. And so if you want to take these elements and make sure, that's reiterated, we can also do that piece too. But like I said, I'm hoping you'll see those in the plan, and they'll be obvious. But anyway, just to let you know kind of where that's at and next steps.
Well, thanks for bringing this up, because I was the one who brought it up, even though I wasn't here at the August meeting. So, but I did watch it. So, I enjoyed hearing that motion. I think, my opinion, it makes sense to have it within the TMP, so then it becomes more of a policy directive to council. I just wanted to make sure that council, a motion from here, our job is to advise council, and I'm making sure they hear it. So, but I would like to hear comments from McInerney to understand. I don't know if that one is really part of the TMP. Your point. So I feel like that one might need to maybe get responded from council to hear their concerns about that.
And the way we would address that, just for your edification, is that we do say that the budget process has its own policy requirements, including confirmation of use of specific funds. So that is part of the budget process, that they follow those rules. So if not, that's something that needs to be brought up maybe separately to City Council, maybe as an individual. But, we feel like the processes were followed to the letter of the law. And so that would not be part of the policy piece to TMP. You're correct.
Can we do both? So can it be policy and bring it up to council? Because I feel like, yes, including policy is super important, but also making council aware of what we're discussing and kind of getting some feedback from council maybe of where they stand and how they feel about what we're suggesting, and would be nice to hear.
Yeah, so we included that in the communication, that both, if you want to do both, that's perfectly acceptable. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lehner. Yeah, I'm a little concerned that we, as a board, approved a motion that had the specific wording recommend to council in it. We were recommending to council that certain actions be taken, and then that didn't happen. It turned into a policy issue, a policy-based rather than project-specific matter when as handled by staff. So I guess I'd like to broaden the discussion a little bit to talk about how it is that we as a board advise city council. And I'll start that by asking some questions. At our July meeting, we adopted a motion to recommend to council that the open space tax be extended. Did council find out about that? Does council know that we took that action?
They were advised of that by the people who brought that forward to you. And so they took it back to council saying, here's the different boards that we took this to and their recommendations. Yes.
Okay. Now, if the CIP will come before us again later this year. So if we moved and adopted a motion to recommend that council remove a particular project from the CIP, would council hear about that? And if so, how would that happen? What's the process there?
It would be mentioned to city council as part of the recommending process as far as projects in the list of CIP, if that was a specific recommendation, or if you had a recommendation to change an aspect of the project that affected the CIP, the actual budget process. Those budget processes where you actually affect the dollar amount of an item, and you have comments about that, would be something that we would take to the budget process and say, your Transportation Advisory Board recommended this specific piece of a capital project. And whatever they do with it, they do as the council. But that's what separated these two pieces was you didn't make a specific recommendation about a project. You made a policy statement, more of an umbrella statement about all projects that we felt was more of a TMP item. And so we did discount that as more of a TMP rather than build it into a recommendation to council as a CIP, because we didn't know, we were caught off guard by the idea that this isn't project specific, and we didn't have anything to state in a budget about your policy directive that you were making statements on.
Okay, well, thanks for that information. I guess I'd encourage my fellow board members to be alert next time we look at the CIP, and that if there are projects there that concern us, we may have to specifically recommend that council remove them from the CIP or somehow change them to meet our desires. Because my recollection is that we had some discussion about TRP 122, which is a widening of Hover Street between Ken Pratt and Boston Avenue. And we also discussed TRP 123, Nelson Road expansion. So those are two projects that were on the CIP that we discussed, and we subsequently passed a motion saying, no more widening, let's focus on those vulnerable users that the city is committed to supporting by inverting the modal hierarchy. So be aware, next time we'd better identify specific projects, and if we don't think they belong in the CIP, we should tell council that and make sure the council hears about it. And those two will be coming up again because it's a 5-year plan. So that's my advice. And another question, is there anything in municipal code or our board bylaws that prohibits one or more of us as board members going to council meetings and signing up for our 3 minutes and telling council what it is that we have recommended?
So, Chair Lehner, Board Member McInerney, in response to your previous statement, those projects, I believe, regarding Nelson Road and widening of Hover, I think the staff did hear you, and those projects, while they're still listed in the CIP, they are not funded. And there's no plans currently, I think, to bring them forward again. They will more likely remain in the CIP, but stay unfunded. And again, we will bring that CIP before you, and we can make it clear what's funded, what isn't funded, for the future. And what I think what would be a help to the board's needs would be to bring that CIP a little bit earlier, so we have more time to react to it if you want to pull a project off. In response to your second question regarding speaking in front of council, to my knowledge, there's nothing in code that would not allow you to step forward. We see it often enough that members of other boards are in front of council speaking about positions they want to take or concerns they have. So we've seen it with PRAB. I think the Sustainability Board members have come forward. So there's nothing that you would not be allowed to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would add or subtract from Jim's statement is, as long as you do so without stating that you have the backing of the board behind you. If you don't, I mean, you can't come in front of, you shouldn't come in front of city council and say, you can say you're a member of the Transportation Advisory Board, that's no problem. But to say that the board agrees, I have the board's backing on this if you don't. I mean, that's we just ask that you separate yourself as an individual of the community, and you can certainly identify yourself as being on the Transportation Advisory Board, but not to speak for the board.
Okay, so if there was an issue that comes up in the future that we as a board think is pretty important, and we want to make sure the council knows our views on the matter, should we pass a motion at our board meeting authorizing one or more of our members to go before council and say that we are representing the Transportation Advisory Board and this is what we want you to hear?
And typically that would probably be your chair or your vice chair. But it's whoever you designate. But we would ask that you work through us as staff. We're the ones to really get that message out to council for you as the liaison. But if you feel like that's not happening, then, or that you can reiterate it even louder by coming to council, that's fine. That works.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate too much of what was already said, but I just see two different things here where there's like the four issues, and I'm glad to see that that they're put into the TMP draft, and I look forward to seeing them on the final project. But as for the city council, like asking city council to confirm that the municipal building renovations projects conform to code restrictions, which I do believe was also specific towards, if I remember correctly, putting solar panels on the municipal buildings, as well as other municipal renovations. That it seems like that felt like it's just fallen off, and that there was no actual confirmation from city council, and so I guess I also just yield to agreeing with what McKee Puero says, where it's just like that I think that we should do both.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Phil and the staff are saying, that the information that you all have or you approve during your session, it does come back to us. And so we read it, and they give us the information, and then we as council, if by chance, if we're in an executive session or something, because we do not executive sessions, we have pre-sessions. And so if I'm here, I think in July I wasn't here, I was in Japan, but we will talk about what our boards are talking about and what they're passionate about. So we do, as a board during pre-sessions, a council talk about what's going on with each of our boards. Staff make sure to inform us of all the boards of what's going on and what your desires and what you all passed. So, so they are doing their job as far as informing us, you know, but there's no problem in you all coming. I think you should come to city council and stand before us and let the entire, because I'm here and I can go and tell them everything that you all are saying, but it's more weight when you all come in front and express how passionate you are about whatever it is about no more widening the roads and everything, which there are very many on council that agree with you. So, but it's nothing like you coming in and also expressing that as well. But I just wanted to reiterate that staff do inform the council whatever you take to them, they bring to us. So that does happen. But there's nothing wrong with you all coming to city council and expressing some ideas and what would be impactful and what you all discuss here.
I think the direction we're hearing as staff, so that you don't necessarily need to move and approve, is that we'll do both and make sure that in the TMP, that the recommendations to city council, that these are included in that as well, if that makes sense for the board. Otherwise, let us know if there's anything different for that.
I guess we can make a motion. I was just going to add for the board's kind of knowledge, if we do feel strongly about something, let me know and I will go to a council meeting and represent the board in public comment. For adding to the TMP, in other words, doing both, TMP and
Staff will do both regardless of a motion and approval, because this is an information item, so it's not really, we didn't really ask for your action. We just wanted to let you know
perfect
what we were thinking, but we did want to get your direction on whether it should be one, the other, or both. And I think everybody's pretty much nodding their head for both, so we'll...
Yeah, I don't
get
think we
on
need
that.
to vote on that. I think
Okay, perfect.
both works.
Thanks. The next item on your agenda is our work plan 2025 is our year, right? Proposed TAB work plan. We just wanted to bring this in front of you. You got it at your last meeting in December. And we did get some comments from folks via email, so appreciate that. And work those into the draft that you see before you tonight. But if there are any other revisions, we're certainly happy to talk about those and see what revisions you'd like to see. But this would be final because this is kind of that second time you've seen it. So we would like to finalize this tonight if you're okay with that. Otherwise, we can make bigger revisions to it if you see fit, if that's necessary, and we could bring those back to you in February for a final passage. But we did want to bring this back to you tonight, just to approve it if you're so inclined.
Well, I'll just weigh in on this. I think we have reviewed this a couple times and have added some items. I guess we can get comments from the board tonight on anything that they feel is amiss. So we can start, if we want to, with Board Member Bennett and come around the...
Sure. Yeah, I don't see any miss, for transparency of things that were added on my recommendations was to pursue the Denver under RTD ongoing, pursue Longmont Denver Express, and then to change call and ride to flex ride service, and then to specifically mention Ride Longmont in the microtransit section.
Let's see. So, I remember last month we didn't really kind of discuss it. And apologies, I didn't, email some recommendations. I do have a couple things that I think we should talk about, especially, as I'm chair of the Bike Issues Committee, the St. Vrain River Corridor keeps coming up in discussion, and I think just having a simple informational update about that corridor, and specifically, like, I would like to hear what's the future plan of that corridor, and then also, as we do continue the flood mitigation work, and then specifically Reach 3, because I think there's an opportunity, especially with more housing development to the west of Hover, that we should think about the multimodal approach that we, maybe there's an opportunity for an underpass, but then, and BIC would very much like to have a discussion on detours and how that impacts us, because it's, it's not just a recreational trail. It is very much a commuter trail. And then if I could add one more thing, because it's a bit more specific and probably a little nuance. And I think we should have maybe a study session of some sort on our stroads. If you know what that word means, I can hear a nod or anything. All right. Does everyone else know? I'll just say, it's a thoroughfare that combines the complexity of a street with the design speed of a road. And they're usually very expensive to maintain, but they're also some of the most dangerous roadways in the entire country. And I think we should start kind of having a future plan of what do we do with those? What do we do with Hover? What do we do with 17th Avenue, 9th Avenue, Airport Road, Pace, to make it more accessible for people who live along that corridor, but then also the safety of commuting and traveling. So but that's what I would like to add for our work plan. So if anyone disagrees, let me know.
In also bicycle, I know it's a big surprise. It's come up a couple of times that we've talked in BIC about the code for bicycles, and I know that there was some discussion about revising bicycle code. But I'd like to hear maybe more about what the city is doing with that process, whether that isn't, it says it's ongoing, but like where ongoing, like is there a point where it's actually going to be updated, or is this anyway, that's what I would like to hear about is the bicycle code, because as I said, it's been come up a couple of times in BIC, and it'll be good to actually get some changes into the code. And then I'd also like to hear about future projects, like the CIP projects are great, but there's obviously long-term plans beyond the CIP, which is part of the TMP, but like after Kaufman, what's the next big project like Kaufman? Like having a multimodal corridor like Kaufman, but what's like the next one that you're looking at beyond that project? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Two items, and I'm not proposing that we add any line items to the work plan as presented. I think I just want to find out when I should bring up these matters. I mean, which of the already existing work plan items they would fall under. The first is that I believe that TAB should advise City Council regarding the implementation of red light cameras and speed cameras in Longmont. And I know some decisions have already been made, I believe, and I'm wondering where we would be able to chime in on that within this work plan. And the second one has to do with multi-use paths. I've had a couple of neighbors who know that I'm a TAB member express their concerns to me about the safety of mixing pedestrians and pets and motorized bicycles on the multi-use paths. So when should I bring that up? Which work item? Is that a bicycle and pedestrian item? Code. Or bicycle code? So I guess I just want to alert staff and fellow board members that that's something that I want to bring up this year and that we should discuss it.
Well, we do have the Vision Zero piece, I think, for the red light and for the speed. That it's kind of falling under our Vision Zero piece, but adaptive.
So would we be getting updates about that in this coming year?
So, yes, as public safety has been, as they are responsible for enforcement of speed laws, they are the lead or a group that is instituting red light cameras and the speed cameras. So we can certainly bring them in at any time to provide updates throughout the course of the year as they institute those programs. Currently, they're in the process of seeking a vendor for both the red light cameras and speed cameras, so they don't have any of those in place yet. But as that moves forward, because the funding was put into the budget, we can certainly bring that back before TAB.
Is it true that locations for such cameras have already been identified?
I think they've identified some of the fixed speed cameras. They're buying a combination of trailers. I think they've identified them. I don't know if the decision has been finalized. But for the last year, the public safety has been collecting data vis-a-vis some of the flashing speed limit signs that we have, and have been, I think they've identified some of the areas in conjunction with Vision Zero and some of those areas of high accidents. So. And I'll just certainly defer to Cammie if she's got any better information than I got.
You're not wrong. I can just clarify. So what passed in the ordinance was, by state law now, you have to name the corridors that are eligible for red light or speed safety cameras, and those have been identified. So there was, I believe, 13 that were in the original ordinance that was passed back in November. But of those 13, it has not been decided yet exactly where we'll start based on the number of cameras we get. So the internal work group with all of the multi-departments coming together that will touch this program are meeting for the first time on Thursday. So we're going to kind of lead that effort to corral the teams and start having those internal discussions to really decide where would we go and why first. Because then there's a whole nother piece of alerting the communities, giving them a heads up, getting signage correct and all of this stuff before any implementation will happen. So that internal planning piece, now that we have approval to explore standing up the program, has been approved with those 13 possible corridors. But beyond that, no decisions have been made as to where yet.
And Cammie, do you have to identify corridors rather than specific locations like schools, hospitals, and parks?
So built in within the state law, there are provisions that are pre-written about what you do in school zones or high-risk zones. So those will be honored, obviously, within any municipality across Colorado about what happens if you're within a school zone or outside of a school zone. The fine limits change. All of that, if you do have red light cameras within a school zone or a hospital zone, those sort of specifics, that's predetermined by the state that we would have to follow.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead, add to it.
I'll also mention that we do have those 13 corridors listed, but those will slowly be incorporated as we first get this program rolling to see what the staff time is, police time is, as well as administrative time to process these citations or disseminate this information out to the public. So we'll start with a few more locations and build more and more as we can feel we can take those on. And when I say we, more public safety, but we'll be working in conjunction with public safety to provide kind of a tertiary data set to show the effectiveness and that we're being effective and not punitive when it comes to traffic safety.
Are you suggesting that this program would increase the workload of the police department?
There is an aspect of this program that would take a certain amount of staff time and police time as well as record keeping.
Oh, I thought you'd just get a turnkey contractor who would do the whole thing, put out the cameras, identify the violators, send out the fine notices.
That's some of the what they're evaluating currently. There are those options, is my understanding from the one meeting I attended. But they're still evaluating. They're evaluating whether they buy the equipment or whether they can just lease it and get exactly what you suggested as a turnkey company that does it all. But there's a price involved with that. Some of the vendors can be pretty pricey to do everything. Others seem to be more reasonable. So because we're also looking at some of the options for, do we do one vendor for all of the cameras, red light, speed cameras as well, or are they going to have several vendors? So I don't think any decisions have been made yet. So they're still working on procuring a vendor or vendors.
All right, well, I'd encourage you as you make those decisions to focus on improving public safety rather than maximizing the fine revenue.
And there's never been a discussion of maximizing the fine revenue at all. It has always been about safety.
Great.
And that's one reason why the PD doesn't want to explore it, is that it is extra capacity for them. It's value add for them to help manage speed on our roads versus because the law did change saying you no longer have to have an officer present to capture speeding information, which was really the game changer part of speed cameras. There will be an officer that reviews all of it on the back end who still gets a chance to say whether the citation is valid or not based on whatever the vendor system captures. But they no longer have to be physically present to issue a citation for speeding, which has really been the limiting factor. So it's adding great capacity to the enforcement piece. And those fines are really limited at the state level as well. And so there's not a huge money-making opportunity to even begin with, but the idea is that that money would be funneled back to help you fund those safety kind of improvement projects or other priority projects for the community as people get more used to cameras being around. What the revenue it would potentially generate will most likely go down over time like it has with all the other communities that have already done this work.
Right.
So-
My understanding, though, was that the state law requires the fine money to go into the municipality's general fund rather than to be dedicated to
Correct.
safety
And then they can decide
projects.
how they want to spend it. So whether it's safety related or some other community
something
priority. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be up to whatever the community decides is their priority.
And if I may, for a moment, go back to my concern about safety on the multi-use paths. When people bring this up to me, I've told them that it's probably under the jurisdiction of the Parks and Advisory Board and that they might want to take their concerns to them. Now, I know that board meets at exactly the same time each month as we do, so it's not like we can coordinate that, but I'm wondering, is there some way for us to get input from that advisory board or their staff liaisons on whether that issue has come up with them, and if so, what they're doing about it?
Yes, we could report back to you on that because they have taken up a number of those issues. I think it's more about the speed differences. So as you're talking about those different things, I think it really boils down to the difference in speeds, especially on some of our well-used paths, it's all the paths, but St. Vrain Greenway kind of sticks out in my mind as one of those ones that we've heard a lot of issues on. So we can get back to you and get their report on that. So they have information on that, and we'll just ask them. And if not, we'll say that it's something that our board has some thoughts and concerns about. So
Great. I'd appreciate that being introduced at some point in our work plan.
I have three questions. The first one being transportation engineering standards and guidelines. I see that the city design standards are as needed. I'm assuming that with Vision Zero that it's starting to come up more often about design standards, but I'm just kind of curious if we can propose a comprehensive study session or public information opportunity regarding the city's transportation engineering standards and the guidelines. Could we discuss the possibilities of organizing such a session to explain the following? What are the rules that we strictly adhered by versus our guidelines that we follow more flexibly for our transportation engineering, particularly regarding our design standards for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, road classifications like stroads and pedestrian zones, use of breakaway anchors, future planning considerations, our application of the MUTCD and the AASHTO, and then the process and justification for implementing certain features, such as warranted requirements for crossings, like kind of what we talked about at the Vision Zero meetings with those folks that came from the public. Our approach to lane width maximums and how we allocate the remaining space for alternative uses of tree planting or bike lanes or wider sidewalks. And I think the goal would be to increase the transparency and public understanding of these decision-making processes in our transportation engineering. What are your all thoughts on organizing such a session that would best structure the topics that I just brought up?
Well, my thought is that it maybe goes into that idea of a study session. So we just put it all together into talking about all those different things. I am trying to figure out how to make this work plan work within 12 meetings, and we usually have less than that. So that's going to be a challenge, just to let you know up front. But we can certainly do the study session piece of that. We just need to figure out kind of the date and time, how we work that into the schedule. And then all the other things that we need to get done, as you saw listed in the work plan, those items that absolutely have to come before you as part of the work that the Transportation Advisory Board does every year. So those are the things I'm going to struggle with as far as answering your question, but we'll work it into a study session, I think. And I believe that Vision Zero is also tackling a lot of these issues, but I don't want to put it all onto them either. But they are looking at the standards, design standards and specifications in exactly the same way that you just mentioned, as far as a safety, how it affects safety and speeds and those kind of things. So,
but who's going to be updating the design standards? Is it Vision Zero? Because I feel
No.
like we're putting a lot of.
That'll be our engineering group that does that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
doesn't Vision Zero also need the updated design standards to move forward with?
well, they'll be through the action plan. They'll make recommendations through the action plan to the city on how to revise the design standards and specifications. So that will come out, and that will come in front of you also as getting your recommendation back on those types of items. So once we get to the action plan level, all those things will be included as far as safety elements on how we can better improve a variety of divisions and departments across the city, as far as how we link them together and then do different improvements at all the different levels: enforcement, engineering, education, all the pieces that we talk about with Vision Zero. So that being said, I think if we can kind of group some of these things together, we can get through the year. So we will do our best to make sure that these things come back before you in a pretty select and focused manner, so that you'll have say on them and get the word back to our city council on your recommendation.
Thank you. For multimodal transportation and project funding, can you provide an overview of how the funding is typically allocated for multimodal transportation projects and what the strategies can be employed to build and secure additional funding for these improvements? For like RTD?
Are you asking for a tax increase?
No.
Okay, just checking. That's typically how these things go. If we're talking about reallocation of budgets, I think is maybe what you're saying.
Right.
So that'll come up with our CIP discussion as well, but we can certainly have that conversation. I know that there was one specific piece about what other projects do you have that are kind of like Kaufman? And that is where we talk about the candidate projects for the 2026-2030 CIP. So maybe at the same time, that conversation can be had as well as with the transportation mobility plan that comes in February to talk about how we allocate funding differently in the city. Because I think that's, again, gets back to that policy piece that we talked about. So if you don't see a project on the CIP that necessarily meets that need, or if we're talking about what's the Kaufman Part 2 piece of this, how do we get to, fund those things is kind of what I heard you saying.
Sure. And then the last thing, another joint study session, integrating land use and transportation planning. Would it be possible to organize another session between the Transportation Advisory Board and Planning and Zoning to explore the intersection of land use and transportation?
We can certainly bring that up. I know they do enjoy talking about transportation as much as we like to talk about land use. So it will work into their topics as well. In fact, we're doing a study session on the 22nd to talk about some of the broader issues with bicycles as they impact the Planning and Zoning Commission as far as bicycle parking and different pieces of that. So that's on the 22nd. If anybody wants to come and join that meeting, there certainly is a public element to that, public invited to be heard element to that. And we'll also be taking the transportation mobility plan to them just to kind of get their buy-off or recommendations as well to that plan.
Because it would be interesting to know what the financial impacts of the city would be for current development patterns, and then also how land use affects transportation. Updating our bike parking requirements, I think, is very important to know, especially with the rideshare and us wanting to get more bikes. And then just aligning with land use policies with transportation goals, just to make sure that we're looking at new building areas as well as transportation needs.
Right, and also I just should let you know that the planning division of the city, the Planning and Development Services division of the city, is actually taking on that idea of relooking at the land use in 2026. It's going to be another year off. Well, we were really trying to get our TMP component, the Transportation Mobility Plan component of that, done much more quickly, and it was something that needed change before the land use has been pretty well set, and the amendment process is a pretty standardized and easy one to go. Well, it's not easy, but it's a process that's already out there and can be amended. We didn't have that ability with our transportation mobility plan, so what we're trying to do is get the new language in there, the different elements that are new to transportation planning since 2016 into this new document. But the land use they felt was pretty well set and was able to be amended pretty well. So in 2026, there'll be another effort to make those changes to envision Longmont's land use side of this too. So just to give you a heads up of that's going to be part of the discussion, as land use will be looked at land use updates will be looked at in 2026.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so before I go back to you, a couple things, I guess, Phil, to address your comment about trying to fit everything in, which I agree. Thought came to my mind, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, because it seems like we're almost having a discussion about reinventing some of this that we're already kind of doing. So my concern is I want to be as efficient as possible and still cover everything that the board wants to cover, and the things that are important that go to council and that sort of a thing. The only change, or the only thing I would like to see as a line item, and I think it's been alluded to here, is maybe public safety having at least one meeting come to. Maybe it's a discussion with Vision Zero, speed, public safety, all those things that are probably wrapped under the Vision Zero umbrella right now. And I know having a conversation with, I can't remember his name, Sergeant of the traffic division.
Jessen.
Thank you. He was more than happy. He said they would come 1 year, to a meeting and do that. So at any rate, that's my thoughts on the matter.
I would suggest we just add that to our work plan for every year, just an annual item that we include. That's something that's probably was in here or should be in here, and I don't see it clearly called out, so we need to add that probably and just do that each year.
Okay, I'm going to.
Okay, then, thank you. The 22nd, was that January 22nd?
January 22nd at 7
Okay.
p.m. In this room.
Is that too short of a notice to potentially encourage any other board members to show up in an official capacity? So where it's a joint study session instead of we're just sitting there, public invited to be heard. Because, in our bylaws, we are supposed to advise Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'm just wondering how we can do that officially.
I would suggest that we talk to the liaison with the Planning and Zoning Commission and just do it as an official joint effort instead of trying to make that meeting something so much larger. And like you said, short notice would be difficult. So I would just suggest we approach the Planning and Zoning liaison, who I sit 2 doors down from, and we'll just chat with them and see how that could work in a future meeting. But let's make it official and try to work it together. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so with respect to the work plan, Phil, do you feel you're going to do another round and bring it back to us?
It's up to you as a board. If I was going to take a lot of these different items that were mentioned tonight and basically just work them into some of the existing pieces that we have, just to say that for St. Vrain Greenway updates, we want some specific items on that. For bicycle code, we want some specific items brought this year on that. And we'll talk more about that after planning and zoning in a couple weeks. The Vision Zero piece, obviously, that's got a lot of different nuances to it, including the part about public safety being involved. And then there's some other safety pieces there too. And then the candidate projects, to make sure that we're talking about kind of that next iteration of projects. And if you're okay with that, I can mix it in. But if not, I'll bring this to our February board, and then you can get a last look at it. Maybe?
Yeah, I think that sounds appropriate.
Okay.
It sounds like you already have an idea as to how you would, I guess, streamline all this into the existing work plan. So why don't we just do that, and hopefully at the next meeting in February, it's more or less a quicker conversation, and we can say, yeah, this looks good, and according to what everybody wants. Do I have any nays on the? No, sounds like we're all in agreement on that. Okay.
That's all we had. Thank you very much.
Okay. Comments from board members. I'll start on the opposite side. So we'll start with board member Kalkofer.
Thank you, staff, for your time today. I really appreciate it. One of the things that I'm concerned about, especially looking at our 2025 work plan and schedule, is especially like land use and planning and zoning, and as we continue to grow, how we're going to be able to afford all of the transportation improvements in the future. If we continue to grow and we kind of sprawl out, how is the city going to be able to afford all of the maintenance for all these new roads that come to us? And that's something that kind of keeps me up at night, is as we continue to grow, how are we going to afford all of this new infrastructure?
I just want to thank staff for all the information they provided this evening and for their patience in hearing our interests and concerns. And I look forward to tab 2025.
I'm going to break it up. I'm going to go now too, and then we'll go all the way around. What the heck, right? I wanted to just add some comments as it relates to the legislative breakfast that we attended last week, because I think there was some meaningful information that I think should be shared with everybody. a couple things was Governor Paulus was able to address and talk about, which I think was fairly important, the idea that transit and housing, and especially affordable housing, but transit and housing, and especially for the state, really needs to be tied together or weaved together with respect to land development, looking at new projects, and he's been on the forefront of that, which I thought was important note. The other thing that RTD came up with, and this is probably not going to answer everybody's problems with RTD on this board, but they're coming up with a comprehensive operations and analysis, which is something that they do at I want to say something like a 10-year mark, or I can't remember, 5-year mark. And they're looking to increase by 100,000 hours of service to their existing kind of plan. That was kind of the goal. So there are some changes that will be happening at RTD. As you know, they're bound by this, or you don't know, they're bound by this operations analysis for, of course, their kind of, if you will, work plan that they will push out. And as you all know, it's really based on demand within the communities. In fact, there was somebody from Longmont that actually made a comment to the RTD director about some of the routes that we've talked about here at this board. And then the other thing that kind of came to mind was State Rep Froelich. She gave a really frank discussion, and this is something to keep in mind as we talk about all this, because everything costs money, is the state's facing a $1 billion shortfall, and that's going to trickle down. And she did say it's going to trickle down. So we need to be aware that all the things that we might have on a wish list and all things we want to see are going to be bound, of course, by what happens at the state level with this shortfall that's potentially coming. And then the last thing I will note is rail. Rail's hot right now. So Craig to Denver, Denver to Craig route. Of course, we talked about the Winter Park, the Front Range, passenger rail. So I think, rail and us being at the forefront of that has been kind of a good spot for us to be in. So that's all I'm going to add, and I'm looking forward to 2025 as well.
So I have a couple of points, I guess, to make. So I also attended the breakfast as well. And I found with a lot of these big meetings of all these big policyholders that there's a lot of congratulations that go around, like, we've done such a great job and everything is amazing. And then there's a lot of when questions come in from people saying oh, there's no service in Erie was one of the questions. And then there was another comment about people who have difficulty walking, how do they access a bus that, they talked about the bus, the AB1 that goes from Boulder to the airport, and the last stop at Flatirons is not accessible really at all to someone who has any type of walking impediment, and pretty much there was no real answer to it. And I don't know, it's great that all these people are coming together and all talking about it, but it always seems like they're just congratulating themselves on what a great job they're doing, but without actually really addressing any of the questions that come in from the audience. So it's nice to hear everything. As a TAP member and a private citizen, it's great that I can attend these things, but it would be nice if they came up with some great solutions to these questions, or if there was a real good, meaningful discussion around some of these things, rather than it being, oh yeah, that's a problem, and we're not really going to think about it. So yeah, that comes up seems to come up a lot with these types of things. But anyway, I appreciate attending, and I thank you for paying for my ticket for it, which is always appreciated. As part of that, I tried to get Ride Longmont to meet Steve here. We were carpooling together, and unfortunately it was a failure for me. I was trying to time it up so that I was going to meet him at a specific time, and without being able to book it in advance, you're kind of playing this guessing game of, okay, I don't want to book it too early, I don't want to be standing around in the cold for half an hour. So I booked it, and I still had 10 minutes before I was supposed to meet him, and the time just kept going up and up and up and up and up. And it was snowy, so weather, I'm sure, was a big factor. But unfortunately, it was a bit of a failure for my first attempt at using Ride Longmont, because it was still free. So I was like, oh, this is great. I don't have to drive in the snow or bike in the snow because that's never fun. But I had to drive in the snow and it was no fun to go and meet with him. So because the bus was like going to be picking me up when I was supposed to be meeting him. So it would just be nice if in the future maybe it'd be possible to book it up in advance. I'm sure you've probably had this feedback on the service that you could say, I need to be here at this time. And you could say, okay, I'm going to book it up, and you can just carry on with your day without having to be sitting there trying to time up. So anyway, that's my feedback on Ride Longmont. It looks great. The app looks great, but I wasn't able to use it. And then in related to that, I was wondering if there's discussions with combining fares for all the different services now we have. So we have Bustang, we have Ride Longmont, and we have RTD. And if you're going to use all three, you're going to be paying for every single one. It would be really nice if there was one fare that would cover all those different services. And I'm sure that's complicated and difficult, but if you want to get from, say, from here to the airport, you could potentially get Ride Longmont to get Bustang to go down to the Union Station and then get the train over to the airport way faster than anything that's happened before. But it's going to cost 3 different fares to do that. So I was just wondering if there's any thought about having a overall fare for all 3 services in the future.
I do think that was mentioned at our legislative breakfast, that the state is looking at that, and Ben kind of confirmed that just now too, that the state is looking at how to combine all that into like one pass, just as you mentioned. That would be wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. So, okay, that was it. So, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for going through the work plan. I know we added a few things, but I think they're all very important items. And then also I wanted to add, I missed the breakfast, but I was able to go to the League of Women Voters hosted an event yesterday to meet, there was 2 senators there and 3 House members there. And just know that there is going to be probably another attempt at RTD overhaul bill. And then there's also a lot of land use bills also presenting. I don't think they'll, we already took care of the parking, but I don't know if they have the guts to. So we'll find out. But definitely there'll be more talk about TODs, train obviously, but then also affordability and housing. And then kind of 2 final points. I was a little disappointed today of not hearing like maybe some preliminary numbers of microtransit for the first month. Maybe it's too early to tell. But I've taken it, I don't know, maybe 15 times, and it's been really fun, to be honest. Even a few times, I'm in the van with some other person, and the awkward conversation of having a little small talk, so which is fun. But
you're good at that though, right?
All right, yeah. But there is a question that came actually today from a friend, and the question was, and I just want it on the record, is like she was saying is like, do we tip? Do we not? She read a report that someone was tipping, so it's like, what? How do you deal with that? Is it just a flat no?
My understanding is that tipping is not endorsed,
Okay.
requested,
Okay.
not supposed to be accepted, but evidently there is a lot of tipping going on, is
Yeah.
the way I understand it. So it's happening kind of outside of
Okay.
what we consider the business of Ride Longmont.
Okay. I just wanted, that's what I told her. I'm like, no, you don't need to tip, don't spend more money. And then also, I know, and then I know I brought up Pratt Parkway and that forced right turn. I was, I drive there because I go to that Safeway and that gas station often, and I still see a lot of people just driving through the forced right. I know there are, 4 signs that tell you to turn right and 2 flashing ones. you know, it's you know, I don't want 5 signs. I think that's a little excessive because then maybe people are paying attention to signs rather than someone trying to cross the road. So, just you know, I just want to kind of, hopefully we have some creative juices to figure out how to get people to kind of obey that lane. Yeah.
Board Member Wicklund, so as part of this, the upcoming year's asphalt rehab program, we will be chip sealing that section of Pratt Parkway. So whenever we do a chip seal project, we look at ways to what we call quick victories or low-hanging fruit. Example I use is either 3rd Avenue or 9th, where we chip sealed it and then we put in bike lanes. Reduced some of the lanes, made it a real quick road diet. But we're looking at that now as part of that program. What do we want to make a change, take it back to the original configuration? So we're still looking at it, but we don't have anything. We're still planning it out.
Right.
But just don't be surprised if come summer there's going to be a change there.
Right.
We have heard a lot from the public about either non-compliance. We've heard from public safety about it. So that area in that intersection, including the right turn coming out of Starbucks and people doing U-turns, has been a challenge for public safety. So we're working on it.
All right. Well then, thank you. I just wanted a brief update on that. So, other than that, happy 2025. Thank you.
And I can give you real quick idea of microtransit if you'd like. So, and Kaylee may have more information, but I will, if you have more, come on down. But we have 9,000 since the start of the program on December 9th. We've had 9,000 ride requests. We've met that demand at a 92% demand rate. 46, almost 4,700 completed rides. And that's with all the different elements where people will request a ride, like Gina did a couple days ago, and you kind of just say, hey, I can't do this. Or you see a ride and different things happen. Basically, our productivity is about 3.4 rides per hour. So the company that's putting this together is very happy with our numbers right now. We have 681 active riders who are currently, we've had 681 different folks who are active in the system. The average ride duration or the average wait is supposed to be about 14 minutes. We said 15 when we talked about the program. Obviously that changes when there's bad weather. And we've been asked by the provider, based on what's happened in the last week, we've been asked by our provider to let them know when bad weather is forecasted for this area, as they don't live here. So that's one of the issues, I think, with this service is we don't have people who actually live here running the behind the scenes show. So the average wait time is 14 minutes to get a pickup. The average ride duration has been about 12 and a half minutes. So again, within our half-hour time that we gave everybody when we talked about this program, the average walking to pick up the service is almost 100 feet, which isn't bad. The average drop-off walking distance is about 82 feet. Not too bad, right? We kind of said we thought it was going to be more like a quarter mile kind of thing. It was when we talked about it. So those things have changed. People rate the service. Of the people who rated the service, 94% give them 5 stars. The average rating is 4.9 out of 5. Accounts created, there's actually been over 2,500 accounts created. So we have the 680 some riders. That's from the 2,500 accounts. Of those, the number of riders that made at least one trip on the service is 1,600 in that month. Plus, the number of riders have gone 1 plus or over 1, 681. Ones that have gone over 2, 452. Riders for 5 plus have been 224. So that gives you kind of the idea of what's going on. We did have a failure. We have to mention that we did have a failure on New Year's Eve that That service was never picked up as we stated publicly, and we were really disappointed with our provider for not being able to cover that service. So obviously, we're not going to pay for that piece of it. But those are some of the numbers. I don't know, Kaylee, if you have more information that you want to share. Oh, perfect. Sorry.
So what I'm hearing is beyond expectation.
Yeah, like I said, everyone's very excited about the way
Yeah.
this service is working. I think it's working exactly as we thought Longmont would do. And there was actually a parallel service that started in Sacramento at the same time, and they're getting like 28 riders per day, 30 riders per day. So we're far surpassing that. I can't remember what our rides per day. It's like 150, 200?
Okay.
Yeah, about 150 per day.
Yeah. And then I thought of another question, just because now you got to pay for it. So I can inform other people is, when you request a ride, does that mean you pay right then and there, or is it when you're picked up?
It's when you're picked up.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
once you're in the van, that's when your payment starts. Otherwise, you can cancel.
Right.
What we're trying to do is, if you do cancel within a certain time period, we're trying to get it so you still have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
If you cancel like 10 minutes or 15 minutes before, that allows that ride to do something else. We need to figure out what that period is.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons we didn't provide this report today officially. It was because we had the free service and we had no idea what those numbers look like compared to what they're going to look like from here on out. So we wanted to give you a better, I think, idea of microtransit with the payment plan in place rather than the kind of the free service, which we don't know how that's going to compare.
Yeah.
But we think it's, people have all said, the word on the street is that $2 or $1 for students, people older than 65, and people with disabilities is a very fair price to pay for this service.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that update, and hopefully we can put it on a map so we can figure out where everyone's going and how, and actually create a network in some fashion someday in our future. So, thank you.
Yeah, without saying much else, I've been doing Ride Longmont, and it's been great. So I do want to. I think that it is good to have a discussion on the safety aspects, especially with riders with disabilities. There was one case that one of the drivers was talking about where he asked to go to a Perkins and he was dropped off at the Taco Star, and that's between Main and 19th, Main and 21st, and having to cross that when you have a back problem, a potential safety issue. Thankfully, she caught on to what was happening and dropped him off at the Perkins instead. But I think it might be an important question about if there's differences that we should, just safety parameters with those drop-off locations. But other than that, I'm really excited, and they are sleek vans.
I did also take it for the first time on Friday, and I loved it. I had 50-50 success. My first ride was successful, and then on my way back, it was at 5:30, peak rush hour for people wanting to go downtown or elsewhere. I couldn't get a ride to where I needed to go, so I just hopped on my bike. But the vans are very clean. My driver was very professional. It was cheaper than my cup of coffee. It was, and the conversation was great. I really loved the service, but I do wish there's some improvements, and I'm kind of curious to see some data once the free rides ended, if we're keeping the momentum of ridership, because I know everybody wants to use it when it's free, but are we kind of materializing now that it is costing either $1 or $2? What our ridership's going to look like going forward?
I just ask for about a quarter of a year of information before we report back. Thanks.
And now we'll go to Councilmember Yarborough.
Thank you, Chair. I would say that regarding Ride Longmont, I have neighbors who I see the van going up and down my street all day long. So I'm like, yes, yeah, so that makes me happy that they're using it even after, they're paying for it. So, so that's a good thing, and I have been seeing it going around Longmont as well. So people are using it, and I think it was an advantage of having it free for about a month or so, more than a month, so that people can get used to the comfort of it, the safety of it, and the convenience of it for those who are able to actually book it. But so, and I mean, it's new, and the perks, it's just, you can't beat that compared to what we already have. And so before that, I think I just really wanted to say, of course, Happy New Year 2025. Just listening about the budget and listening about the CIPs and about the solutions, and I just can't not say something. As an elected official, like this micro transit, it didn't happen in 2 months. So you all deserve a pat on the back for all the work you put into it. It took a long time for us to get it. And so a lot of times when elected officials are saying, yay, we did a good job, because it may have taken 5 to 10 years to get to that point. So, so yeah, and now on to the next, right? And so we got so many things that we have to do, just like, and everything we have to do takes money. Everything. Everything that you want to change, everything that you breathe on takes money. So I know I mentioned this maybe in the summer or in the spring of 2024, but as well as having the public safety here, we need to have finance here. We need to have Teresa or Jim. I don't know if Jim left the coop yet, but good. Okay. I would highly, highly, highly suggest that we have someone here to go over the budget so that the advisory board can understand when there's, even though it may be listed in the CIP, if there's no funding for it, it's not happening. And then those things that where they do see how we're going to pay for this infrastructure, that's a really good question. So I think it's very, very important that we have them here maybe twice a year to come and explain, or definitely during budget time, so that they can make, understand and make really good decisions as far as money-wise for the budget. So when it's presented before them, they can understand, not that you all don't understand money, but you can understand what's going on with the budget and where the money is going. Because I know it's been brought up several times, and I want the finance to be here to answer every question that you all have, because you are making some huge decisions for our city. And I want you to be able to tell other constituents that, hey, or your neighbors, this is why this wasn't funded, but we're working on it, And so basically that's really what I want. I don't know if you can get either one of them here or both of them here soon. Okay, let's get Jim. Oh, it won't be Jim? Okay. He's leaving. I know he's running out the door up the street somewhere saying, see, don't want to see you. Okay. So anyway, that's really all I have to say is great job on Ride Longmont, and looking forward to all of these other study sessions and things like that. And I always invite the board to come to city council meetings for public invited to be heard, because it's nice to see nice faces.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to the items for the upcoming agenda, which would be, the next meeting is February 10th. Save the date. And it looks like we'll have TMP recommendations to City Council.
Yes, and we'll also have a CIP 2025 update.
Yeah. I was just
So
going to
you will
say,
get- you will get
items
the
to go to
update.
the city council with, right?
Yeah, this isn't the one, this isn't the one to kind of decide on the next tranche of, or the funding piece of that.
Yeah.
But it is for that. And then I wanted to make one last announcement, is that this is Diane Larson's last meeting with us. She's going to retire at the end of this month, so I'm going to put her on the spot and make sure everybody gives her a great round of applause for helping us out all these months. Thank you.
Well, we're going to miss you. No, you don't. You're retiring. Come on. Okay, we can move to adjournment if I can get a motion.
Motion to adjourn the January 13th, 2025 Transportation Advisory Board meeting.
I will second that motion.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Great, we're adjourned. Thank you.